All right, in this final lecture, we're going to talk about how the strategy for the British begins to shift to the south, and where the Americans actually defeat the British is going to be in the south. Now, if you remember from previous lectures, this war really begins up in New England with the Battle of Lexington and Concord, Fort Ticonderoga, Breed and Bunker's Hill, and driving the British out of Boston. And then it moves to the middle colonies. General Howe's forces return, where they attack Washington's forces at Long Island, Manhattan. Washington is able to make a miraculous surprise attack on the Hessians and at Princeton. Then, General Burgoyne comes up with a plan to cut off New England from the rest of the colonies. Burgoyne's plan ends in defeat at the Battle of Saratoga, which is the turning point of the war. So that was the New England colonies and middle colonies. Well, the British began to move the strategy and their battle plan to the south, because in the south the British have a lot of loyal subjects left. A lot of people are still loyal to the king and parliament. They're obviously still upset about the taxation without the lack of representation, but there's still more loyalty in the south than in any other part of the Americas. All right. Now, the loyalists and the patriots had been fighting since the start of this war. There had been atrocities committed by both sides, but when 1780, when the British army arrives, the tactics get even more brutal. And as a result, more settlers turn against the British. Their loyalty begins to shift towards the patriot cause because of the brutal tactics of the British. You can see on the slide that there is a very famous quote that says, "Great Britain now has 100 enemies where it had one before." So these brutal tactics that the British employ in the South do not work. Some people that you need to really know in this lecture are Nathaniel Greene and Daniel Morgan. Nathaniel Greene is from New England. He's a great military leader. Some call him only second to George Washington as a military leader. He used his knowledge of the terrain very, very effectively. He is not going to fight the British where the British want him to fight. Rather, he is going to fight the British only on ground that gives him an advantage and puts the British at a disadvantage. Okay? So Cornwallis is chasing Nathaniel Greene all around the Carolinas, basically to trap him. But Greene doesn't play that. He constantly moves his forces around and will only engage the British on grounds that puts him at an advantage. Now, with Nathaniel Greene is a guy you have already been introduced to, Daniel Morgan. If you remember from the Battle of Saratoga and Burgoyne's march down to Albany, Daniel Morgan has been sent by George Washington with Morgan's rifles, and they have killed most of the native guides that are with Burgoyne and shot many of their officers. Well, Daniel Morgan is down with Nathaniel Greene. Now, Greene, who is the overall commander, divides his forces, gives parts of it to Daniel Morgan. Now, Daniel Morgan fights one of the most famous battles in the Revolutionary War. It's the Battle of Cowpens. And what he does is he has with him his trained army, but also quite a bit of militia. Militia are very lightly regarded by the British. The British have been able to easily defeat the militia in almost every engagement they've had. So, at the Battle of Cowpens, Daniel Morgan is going to fight Lieutenant Colonel Bannister Tarleton, who is the commander of the Dragoons, or the cavalry. He knows that Tarleton doesn't think much of militia, so he puts his militia out front, has the militia fire 2 rounds at Tarleton, and then run away. Run away. As they're running away, they're reloading their rifles. Run up and over a hill. Tarleton thinks it's just a typical retreat by the militia, and he chases after them. Chases them, and this is where he falls right into Morgan's trap. Because waiting for Tarleton is the remainder of Morgan's trained forces as well as the militia, and they crush the Dragoons at the Battle of Cowpens. Right? Chase them right into a trap. It works really well for our favor, and again shows the overconfidence and underestimation of the British against the militia and the American forces. The other guy that plays a key role in the American victory in the South is Francis Marion, better known as the Swamp Fox. Okay? Now, he uses unconventional asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics against the British. He lives in the swamp. He hides there most of the day and comes out at night and just wreaks havoc and terror on the British Army. He comes out when the British are trying to rest, and he attacks the British forces, able to kill 1-2 guys at a time. Nothing to, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. But really what it does is create psychological damage to the British Army. They're tired, they're exhausted, they're running low of supplies, and even at night, they're not safe. They know that this guy can appear just out of the swamps, out of the mist, attack them without any recourse. They cannot capture him. They cannot find him. He knows the swamps. The British Army does not. And he creates terror and havoc with the British forces. So Cornwallis, who's been tromping around the Carolinas trying to engage Nathaniel Greene, we could talk about the Battle of Guilford Courthouse and some other things, but we just don't have time for that today. I'm sorry. But let's talk about Cornwallis at Yorktown. Cornwallis is running low on supplies. His men are tired. He wants to get back to Virginia to meet up with the Royal Navy to get resupplied, as well as cut off supplies that are coming in to the southern colonies from the middle and northern colonies. Okay? But he's disobeyed orders. General Clinton, the overall British commander, now that Howe has resigned, has ordered Cornwallis's forces to meet him up in New York, where Washington is still. Cornwallis disobeys this order and heads to Yorktown, to the peninsula, where he is cut off. All right? Let's leave him there for just a minute and talk about Benedict Arnold. Benedict Arnold should have gone down as one of the greatest generals in American history. He is a key player at Fort Ticonderoga, but Ethan Allen gets the credit. He defeats Colonel St. Lazare on his eastward bound movement toward Albany, but he doesn't get any credit. He is truly the hero at Saratoga, but once again, he doesn't get credit. He is shot in the leg. He has become crippled, and he does not get any credit. So Arnold decides to betray his country. He asked Washington if he could take command of West Point. West Point is a fort on the Hudson River. It's a strategic location. It's the location of the present-day United States Military Academy. And he decides that he is going to turn it over to the British. So he makes these plans with the British. And what he does is his plan is to weaken the fort. So he doesn't guard the fort. He doesn't fix the chain across the river. He makes sure that his soldiers are away from their posts, doing errands, just so that they're not there when the British do come. Now, he meets with a guy named Major Andre of the British Army, and he gives him the plans. Major Andre then is forced to leave. He was supposed to be picked up by the British Navy, but the British warship, the Vulture, comes under attack and leaves, so he has to make it on land. He is captured by Americans who find the plans and realizes that he is a spy. The plans are sent to George Washington. Washington realizes that Arnold has betrayed him. Now, the guys that arrest Major Andre, the spy, then, not knowing that Arnold is involved, inform Arnold that they have caught a spy and he has plans of West Point. Arnold realizes that, oh my gosh, they're going to find me out, and he escapes. He goes to the British. They make him a brigadier general. He then leads troops, British troops, against his own country. He captures Richmond, Virginia. He almost captures Thomas Jefferson, and he wreaks havoc all through Virginia. But, the war's going to come to an end. The British are going to lose us. Arnold is never captured. There was a standing order from Washington, if they did capture Arnold, that he was to be hung on the spot without trial. But he is never caught, and he returns to England, where many people don't trust him. He's betrayed his country. Why should we trust him here in England? So it's a sad story. A great American general initially, but because of his pride, his ego, and his greed, he betrays our country. And now, instead of being known as a great American hero, he's known as the greatest traitor in American history. So let's turn our attention back to Cornwallis at Yorktown. Cornwallis is on the peninsula right here in Yorktown. Washington, with the French general Rochambeau, realizes that Cornwallis has backed himself into a corner. So Washington and Rochambeau rush south. All right? General Wayne and the Marquis Lafayette come from this direction, and they have bottled Cornwallis in on the peninsula. He can't escape by land. Cornwallis may initially not have been that concerned because the British Navy will evacuate him. But guess who arrives? Admiral de Grasse and the French Navy. All right? The French Navy. They drive around the British and they blockade Cornwallis in on the peninsula. So now Cornwallis cannot flee or escape by land, and he cannot escape by sea. He is hemmed in. Oh, he struggles and tries. He tries to escape by small boats. Storms come up, wreck his boats, drown several of his soldiers. He tries to spread smallpox to the American forces. But remember, Washington has inoculated his troops with that rudimentary attempt at Valley Forge, and it works. American troops do not get sick with smallpox. And finally, Cornwallis realizes that the gig is up, and he has to surrender. So he surrenders on October the 19th, 1781. And as the British are marching out of the fort, through the lines of Americans and French lining the rows, the British Army marches out laying their guns, and a British band strikes up a song known as The World Turned Upside Down. And isn't that an amazing song? I mean, if you think about it, the mighty British Army has been defeated by a bunch of farmers, shopkeepers, carpenters. The world has indeed turned upside down, at least for the British. Now, this war is going to continue for a few more years, but mostly in other parts of the world. No more fighting. Major fighting has stopped in North America. We sent Benjamin Franklin, John Jay, John Adams to meet with the British to ratify a treaty, a peace treaty. And it is signed in Paris in 1783 and ratified in the United States. The British recognize the United States as an independent country. We have won our independence, and Britain recognizes that. They do ask the Americans to pay back the Loyalists for the property that have been damaged or lost, but it never happens. We don't give it to them. And America gets all the land in the Northwest Territory and the Ohio Valley. So America now has doubled in size. America extends from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River, from the Great Lakes down to Florida. Now, Spain has also joined in on our behalf, and as a reward for being on the winning side, they win back, or get back, Florida. Remember, Spain had lost Florida during the French and Indian War, and for a short period of time, the British, for about 20 years, have owned Florida, but Spain gets that back. So why did America win? There's lots of reasons. I think the overconfidence of the British, their underestimation. We use deceit. We use guerrilla tactics. But a couple key things that you need to keep in mind. Geography. We're fighting on our own home field, our home court advantage. We know the land, the British don't. George Washington turns out to be a very impressive leader. When things are the darkest and the bleakest, Washington doesn't give up. He inspires his men to continue the fight. And Washington turns out to be the absolute perfect man at the right time to lead the American cause. Without a doubt, we probably had a very difficult, if not impossible, task if we did not get help from France and Spain, but especially France. France provides us money, weapons, troops, and most importantly, the Navy. Remember, if the French Navy had not arrived off of Yorktown, then the British Navy would have been able to evacuate Cornwallis, and this war would have probably continued. But the French are key allies. It really bankrupts France and is going to lead to the French Revolution and the downfall of their monarchy, King Louis XVI and his wife, Queen Marie Antoinette. And finally, there's that growing sense of patriotism. At the beginning of this war, only about a third of the people in the colonies support this cause. But by the end of the war, most Americans, people living in the colonies, have now turned away from Britain and are siding with the Patriots. So the war is over. We have won our independence. The world has indeed turned upside down. But in one way, this was the easy part. Now what are we going to do? What kind of government are we going to have? Well, that's going to be for another lesson and another course.